Hey, I'm Amy and welcome back, and it is time once again to talk about what I watched last month in November. I am very excited. This one may be a little bit shorter because I just wasn't really in the mood to watch movies this month, I guess. I don't know. I didn't really watch a whole lot. If you want to follow along, you can check out my Letterboxd. It will be linked in the description down below. Before I get into movies, let's talk about maybe some of the TV because that's not really recorded on Letterboxd. I have been maybe watching a little bit more TV lately. I've been watching the new season of Doctor Who that started on the 31st of October. And I've been doing a little review podcast on Mondays on my Patreon. It's kind of fun to hear me talk about how annoyed I am with this season, I guess. Maybe if you're a fan of Doctor Who and you are also annoyed like me. But because of that, I have been rewatching Doctor Who again from the beginning of the Christopher Eccleston seasons. So I've been doing that. I've also just been watching Succession because who doesn't love Succession? If you have not seen it, I recommend it. It's very good. I love it so much. And I don't think that there's any other new television shows. I have been listening to a lot of podcasts, as I always do. My podcast playlist is linked in the description down below if you want to check out what I watch or listen to on a weekly basis. It is updated pretty much every day, so if you want to follow along on what I listen to, I would be sure to check it out every day. So let's get into my Letterboxd. I started November off with a bunch of Peacock true crime docuseries and documentaries. I still had a little bit of time left over from when I got a Peacock account, the paid one, not just the free one, from watching Halloween Kills. So I watched the John Wayne Gacy docuseries. It was pretty good. I don't know a lot about John Wayne Gacy, so this was a lot more interesting than a lot of people who do know maybe more about him would find. For some reason, for me, if you know who John Wayne Gacy is, you know he's usually associated with being the clown killer, and they talk very little about him being a clown. So I found that very interesting. It had really almost nothing to do with him, and it was just a side job he had once or twice, and it was really interesting. I also watched The Toolbox Killer, Rifkin on Rifkin, which are both, I think, if I remember correctly, it's been over a month since I've watched these. The Rifkin on Rifkin one is definitely just the serial killer talking about what he did. And the Toolbox Killer, I think, is something similar. It's tapes of him talking. Dr. Death is fascinating. I believe there is a TV series called Dr. Death and a podcast as well. I have not listened to or watched either of them. I rewatched Holes for the podcast. Great episode. And highly recommend listening to that. Nostalgia Effect, it's in the description. I also watched the Peacock series on Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know how everyone in that show pronounced her name differently, but Epstein's girlfriend, whatever, she's on trial right now. I have not been following that. I am waiting for those docuseries to come out. I also watched Eternals, which was great. I liked it a lot. I did a review on it if you want to check that out. It's not my favorite Marvel, but I really enjoyed myself because I have not enjoyed a Marvel movie except for like the first two Thors maybe. I also watched The French Dispatch, which is the new Wes Anderson movie. I did a little experiment with that and I watched zero. I did not know anything about it, literally nothing about it going in. Didn't watch a trailer, didn't watch a single review, didn't read anything about it, and it was kind of middling for me. I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it's not my favorite Wes Anderson, definitely. Next, I watched a lot of these short films that were leaving Criterion from Curtis Harrington. They were really great for what they were. They aren't like groundbreaking, but The Fall of the House of Usher from 1942, he made that when he was 14 years old, I believe. Yeah, he made that when he was 14 years old. He remade it again as Usher, which I had watched the next day. So pretty much everything you're seeing right now are all of these Curtis Harrington short films. And Usher was really great. It was fantastic. He plays Usher in both Usher in the Fall of the House of Usher, and I don't want to spoil anything about it because I didn't know the story of it. It's based on an Edgar Allan Poe poem or short story. Really, really great. Usher was probably my favorite of all of these. Fragments of Seeking was also really fascinating as well. It is rated higher than Usher on here. It's a very abstract kind of thing. Very interesting. And then I watched a couple, I think some of these are 1001s that were leaving HBO and or Criterion. I don't remember much about any of these. Ninchaka, though, was probably my favorite out of all of these. I really enjoyed that. Who was the main? I honestly, it's been so long. Greta Garbo. I really do love Greta Garbo. I don't know why I blanked on who she was for a second there, but Greta Garbo is fantastic, especially in Ninchaka. Some more 1001 films, and just films that were leaving HBO and Criterion. I finally watched Sabrina, which is an Audrey Hepburn film. It's a film that I've been wanting to watch for so long. It's got just amazing cast. Audrey Hepburn, Bill Holden, Humphrey Bogart. Oh, it was so good, so beautiful. I love Audrey Hepburn. I watched the last two Man with No Name films with Clint Eastwood because they were leaving HBO very early in the month. So I had to watch those since The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I almost forgot what it was for a second. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is probably my favorite Western of all time, closely followed by The Searchers, but I think that's only because it's one of Scorsese's favorite films, so I'm like, oh, if it's Scorsese's favorite film, I gotta like it. I have to rewatch it. I have not watched it since the Scorsese class I took in college, but Once Upon a Time in the West I also watched, but I am not as big of a fan. I'm not a huge fan of Westerns, I will say that, put that out front. So The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is leaps and bounds better than absolutely any Western I've ever watched. But I loved that. What am I trying to say? I'm losing my train of thought. But I did enjoy these two Westerns, just not as much as that one. So out of those three, I would probably go number one, if I'm ranking them, of course, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and then a few dollars more, and then A Fistful of Dollars. I watched this one took me a couple days to watch just because it was kind of long and I got busy with other things and didn't get a chance to watch all of it at one time like I usually do. I'll usually sit and play a docuseries in a single day while I'm working. The Disappearance of Maura Murray was also a Peacock docuseries. It was really fascinating. The filmmakers went in really, really deep with their research and talking to the family and to other true crime podcasters and internet sleuths that had done research into her disappearance. Some more films that were leaving HBO, including Woodstock and Easy Rider, which were, I don't remember, I think Woodstock and Easy Rider were two of the films, and Dracula as well. Maybe Soup to Nuts, Nothing Sacred, Dracula, Woodstock, and Easy Rider were all 1001 movies that were leaving HBO that I checked off the list. I also watched 4 Hours at the Capitol, which, do not watch that if you do not want to be depressed for 2 days after. I made the mistake of watching that, and I have not been the same since, although that's probably totally different, not really associated with watching this documentary about the insurrection on January 6th. And then a couple days later, to cleanse myself, I watched Taylor Swift's All Too Well short film, cried my eyes out for 6 hours, and felt a lot better. Such a good short film. Oh, so good. I love Taylor. I also watched Big. That was part of the 1001 movies for this month. If you did not know, I talk about this every week. I give my patrons a list of 1001 movies, and the producers get to pick which one they want to see me talk about, and I will do a video for it at the beginning of the next month. Big was on that list. I don't think any of these other ones. Oh, it was Big, The Matrix, West Side Story, and one other one I do not remember. We'll find it later on. But I watched Big. I really enjoyed that. It's extremely weird. It is a very 80s movie. If you have not watched it, I don't know if I would recommend it. I like it a lot, but it's very weird. Yeah, if you do not know anything about it, go into it not knowing anything about it. I knew what it was because I know people talk about it, but... And then I watched a couple more. The Hucksters and Olivia, I believe, were just leaving Criterion Channel, so I watched those. I watched RoboCop for the first time for the podcast. That was a fun episode. I had a fun story about watching RoboCop for the first time, so if you want to watch that or listen to that, check out the link to my podcast in the description down below as well. I watched After Hours. That was leaving the Criterion Channel. It is one of the... Actually, there's a lot of Scorsese movies that I have not seen. So After Hours was a Scorsese movie that I have not watched and I needed to. So I did that. I watched all of the Matrix movies because even though only the first one is on the list, I want to watch all of them before Resurrection comes out this month. Tampopo was the other 1001 movie for this month, so I watched that. Thief was leaving, and I think that's one of the only... forget the director's name, Michael Mann. That was one of the few Michael Mann movies that I have not seen. And so I thought maybe I should watch that. And then after that, because it was leaving Criterion, I watched a couple other films that were leaving Criterion. The Mummy, which is not the original Mummy, the Universal classic horror monster, it does have... It's Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. There is a bunch of Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee UK versions of Universal monster movies that were leaving HBO, so I watched that, and then a couple Dracula movies, like 2 different Dracula movies, I believe, that were leaving HBO, so I watched those. That was, The Mummy was the first one. I also watched Orange County with Colin Hanks and Jack Black. That was surprisingly funny. I didn't love it, but it had a very Judd Apatow energy that I usually really hate, but there was a couple times in this that I really enjoyed myself. And Deliverance, Splendor in the Grass were 2 criteria, or 2 1001s that were either leaving, they were leaving HBO. So I checked those off the grass. I watched Red Notice, the new Ryan Reynolds, DJ, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, whatever he's going by now, and Gal Gadot, whatever. Did not enjoy it. I like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but I'm not a huge fan of her in much else. I'm gonna get hate for this, but I don't feel like she has a personality. I then watched, to cleanse my palate the next day, watched Ghostbusters Afterlife. Oh, chef's kiss. Perfect sequel to the original. The second one didn't not happen. The 2014 one definitely did not happen. But this one, if you have not watched it, definitely breezes over Ghostbusters 2. And it's a great, beautiful sequel to the original Ghostbusters. I cried, I laughed. I want more, but I also don't care if they don't do more because it's a perfect ending to the story. They definitely lead into them doing more, but I like the fact that Jason Reitman took over for his father and Ivan Reitman did have some input into this. It was just so wonderful. So wonderful. I'm like choking up thinking about it again. I cannot wait for it to come out on Blu-ray so I can watch it yet again and add it to my collection with the first 2. I do have the 2016 one. Did I say 2014 earlier? I do have the 2016 one. I have not watched it since I watched it in theaters. I purchased it because I had the first 2, so I wanted to, have all of the Ghostbusters just the same way I have all of the Fantastic Beasts movies. I have two Fantastic Beasts movies. And the Hobbit movies because I want to keep my collections full. You know what I'm saying? I'm weird like that. I got a collection. I gotta keep my collection full even if it's bad movies. And then if you know me at all, you know I love Psych. Psych is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, along with I Love Lucy and Boy Meets World. So of course I had to watch the new Psych movie, especially when it's about Gus, who's my favorite character of all time. Like, I am Bert and Guster. Nobody can say otherwise. My sister even said I'm Bert and Guster, basically. But Psych 3 is not a perfect movie by far, but if you are a Psych fan, you will enjoy it. It just captures that beautiful essence. It's not as great as the TV show. I don't think it's as great as the first one. The second one was okay. I need to rewatch it again, but yeah. If you're a Psych fan, I love having more Psych in my life. I love the new podcast that Timothy Odmanson and Maggie Lawson are doing. So great. I'll take all of the Psych stuff I can get. And then a couple more, I think Titus and Men in War were leaving Criterion, so I checked those off. Titus was really interesting. I did not like it at first, but I kind of started getting into it. It's like modern Shakespeare. It's very weird. I highly recommend checking it out if you can find it. Let's see if it's still anywhere. It says it's still on Criterion, but it was leaving Criterion, so who knows. An American in Paris was leaving HBO. I checked that off the list. That was very fascinating and interesting. It is Gene Kelly. Yeah, literally. How can you dislike something when Gene Kelly is a star? He's great. He's fantastic. Love Gene Kelly. The Curse of Frankenstein was another one of those UK monster not rip-offs of classic Universal monster movies, but Peter Cushing and I think Christopher Lee is in this as well. Yeah. So it's another one of those. It wasn't like the best, but it was fun. It was fun to just see a Frankenstein movie. Both the this Curse of Frankenstein and The Mummy were very, very much in the same vein as any other Mummy or Frankenstein movie you've ever seen. So it's nothing new. It's just new actors. And it's fun to see Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee battle each other. I then watched True Romance and cried my eyes out. We all know I am not a huge fan of romance movies, but there was something about the scene where Patricia Arquette and when Patricia Arquette falls in love with Christian Slater's character on their first date together, that just really hurt me so much. And yeah, it's a great film. If you have not watched it, I highly suggest watching it. It is written by Quentin Tarantino, which surprised me because I am not a huge fan of a lot of Quentin Tarantino's films. I talked about this in my haul last week, but Quentin Tarantino does tend to ramble on in his scripts, but I think it's just when it's things that he's directing as well. And then after that, the Wrath of Titans remake was leaving HBO, so I watched that. It's really not that great. Don't know why I decided to watch it, but whatever, I did. I also watched the new Disney movie Encanto. I don't think Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote it. I think he just wrote the music. Yeah, he just wrote the music. It's so cute. It's fun. It's about family. I don't know how much I would watch it. It's probably not in my top favorite Disney movies of all time, but it's very cute. It's very sweet. If you like Disney movies, you will enjoy this. It's magical. The next day, because this was Thanksgiving week, so there were movies coming out early, I watched House of Gucci, which is the new Ridley Scott movie starring Lady Gaga and Adam Driver and Al Pacino and Jared Leto and a ton of people. I really only went to see it for Lady Gaga and Adam Driver and the true crime-ness of it all. If you want to see my thoughts on it, I will be doing a review, I think next week. I don't remember when that review is coming out, but check that out. I also watched the Von Dutch docuseries that was on Hulu. If you grew up in the 2000s, Von Dutch, or if you were a fan of pop culture in the 2000s, Von Dutch was a name that you knew. I recommend checking it out. It's not like a earth-shattering documentary, but it's interesting to see a lot of the different sides of the story, because none of this I knew. I just knew it as a brand that Paris Hilton and a lot of celebrities wore that looked kind of trashy. I did not realize that the designer for that also went on to design or Start Ed Hardy, which is another very similar brand that is just, that thing. But Von Dutch is known for those trucker hats that Ashton Kutcher wore for the majority of his early career. I also watched the Jonas Brothers Family Roast, which you don't need to watch if you're not a Jonas Brothers fan. You probably won't find it funny at all. I liked it a lot, but I am also a massive Jonas Brothers fan, so it worked for me. Also, it's not like the best thing ever, but it was fun while it lasted. I also watched Yours, Mine, and Ours, not the new one, or not the remake. I've seen the remake. It's okay, but I Love Lucy one. The one with Lucille Ball was playing on Turner, and I was like, you know what? I need to watch this. So I started it from the beginning, watched it. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's Lucille Ball. I love her so much. Next day, watched Cutting Class, which was the Patreon bonus review that goes up on Patreon exclusively. If you want to check that out, you have to check out my Patreon in the description down below. This was an interesting review. It was an interesting movie. If you don't know anything about it, don't know anything about it going into watching it, because I didn't. I knew zero about it. It was suggested by my patrons, and yeah, it was interesting and it was fun, and I recommend it. It was interesting. Same day I watched Tick Tick Boom, and I watched it. I started watching it, and literally as they were introducing the character of Stephen Sondheim, I got a notification from the Hollywood Reporter that he had passed away. It was a very surreal, weird moment, and yeah. So that was interesting. But Tick Tick Boom is absolutely beautiful. I love it. I highly recommend it. Andrew Garfield can sing. It was directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he is just as great of a director as he is a songwriter. I also watched King Richard that day, which was a letdown from Tick Tick Boom. Will Smith is good. It's an okay movie. It's a biopic. I don't know. It didn't really, hit any chords with me. I could care. I don't know. Yeah, it's a feel-good movie if you need a feel-good movie. So suggest that. Still that night, I watched all of the first two Fright Night movies, the original ones from 1985 and 1988, I believe. These are, Tom Holland movies. I think Tom Holland only did the first one. I don't know if he did the second one. No, he did not do the second one. And then I watched the remake, which was really good. Remakes usually, to me, aren't that great, but this was a great remake. It's got a huge cast. Anton Yelchin, Imogen Poots, Colin Farrell, Toni Collette, David Tennant, Christopher Mintz-Plasse. Dave Franco is in this as well. It's a great cast. It's a great remake. I suggest watching it. I also rewatched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you watched my haul, you know I got the novelization, and I read literally half of it in a day, and reading it made me want to rewatch the movie. I still have yet, and that was a week ago, have yet to finish reading the rest of it. I just got busy. I actually kind of like it, but it is that thing where Quentin Tarantino does tend to ramble on. So I'm not like completely sold on it, but it does help with, it does give you a greater appreciation for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I then watched Gremlins for the first Christmas or holiday themed episode of our podcast that is going up yesterday. I think it went up yesterday. Yeah, if I am remembering my schedule correctly, it went up yesterday, and it's a fascinating episode. I say this about all of the Nostalgia Effect episodes. It was an interesting episode. It did not turn out the way I had expected it to. So, if you want some surprises, check that episode out. And then to wrap up this month, I watched The Beatles Get Back. That took me like 3 days to watch. Those are very long episodes. I did not watch them as they came out on Disney Plus. I spent a couple of days watching them while I was working. It's so good. It's beautiful seeing how they work together, seeing their camaraderie and their friendship, and how much they really did love each other. leading up to that really famous rooftop concert. And right after that, I watched 5 minutes maybe of the Queen family sing-along. Literally only watched it because it was Queen in the title. I was like, oh, we're gonna listen to some Queen songs. Started watching it and I turned it off as soon as JoJo Siwa started singing We Will Rock You. 5 minutes in, and I think this is the first time I've ever logged something that I did not watch all the way through. That's everything I watched this month. It's not as extensive as it usually is, but let me know some of the things that you watched this month in the comments down below. If you have any suggestions for me to watch in December, let me know that as well. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really truly do appreciate you, whoever you are. Let me know here in the comments down below, and let's be friends. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and subscribe if you're new, because I love talking all things movies, TV shows, filmmaking, film history, all that fun stuff. And I'll see you next time. Bye.